Welcome to Quaderno Academy, empowering excellence through education. Join us as we inspire growth and unleash your potential. Let's dive in.
Today, we're going to talk about a really powerful idea in leadership: how to get your team to not just follow you, but to want to follow you. We're going to look at what it takes to go from leading by force to leading with trust, and what it really means to build moral authority.
So let's just dive right in with a question every single leader should be asking themselves. Seriously, think about it. The people you lead, are they with you because they want to be, or because they just have to be? You see, that's the huge difference between formal authority, the power your job title gives you, and moral authority, which is the influence you earn by who you are. And one of those lasts, the other, not so much.
And this really breaks it down, right? On one side, you've got formal authority, where your team has to listen. On the other, you've got moral authority, where your team wants to listen. So how do we get there? Well, the very first step is to throw out this old idea that you have to be one of two extremes.
We often think it's a choice, You either have to be the permissive good guy who just lets everything slide, or you have to be the authoritarian bad guy who rules with an iron fist. But that's a false choice. There is a much better way, a third alternative that lets you keep both the relationship and the standard. Okay, so let's see how this works in the real world. Picture this. You're a leader, you walk into a warehouse, and you see a group of your employees smoking, right under a giant no smoking sign. I mean, it's a clear violation of policy, and they're not even trying to hide it. So what do? What's your gut reaction? For most of us, our instincts push us to one of two extremes. Do you just ignore it because you don't want the confrontation? Or do you march over there and lay down the law to make an example of them? The thing is, both of those options come with some serious costs. If you go the authoritarian route, can't you guys read? Sure, you'll get them to put the cigarettes out, but you've also created resentment and you've damaged the relationship. And if you go the permissive route, just ignoring it or worse, joining them, well, you've just lost all your credibility. You've sent a message that the rules don't actually matter. Neither one builds any trust. But what if there's another way? And this is that third alternative in action. The leader in this story, he walks over, he actually hands them each a cigar, and then he just says, "I'd appreciate it, boys, if you'd smoke these on the outside." He didn't yell, he didn't shame them. He treated them with respect, but he still upheld the rule. He managed to preserve the relationship and the standard, and in doing so, he earned their respect, not their resentment. So, where to even start building this kind of moral authority? Well, it all begins with creating an environment where people feel safe. And I don't just mean physically safe, I mean psychologically safe. Safe enough to be honest, to admit mistakes, and even to challenge a bad idea without being afraid of getting punished. Now check this out, because it's going to sound completely backward. A famous Harvard study found that the very best, most effective nursing units in a hospital actually reported more mistakes than the lower performing ones. How on earth is that possible? The answer comes down to one really crucial idea. See, it's not that the best teams are messing up more. Not at all. It's that they have the trust, the psychological safety to report their mistakes. They feel safe enough to put their hand up and say, "Hey, I almost made a huge error here." And that allows the whole team to learn from it and make sure it never happens again. In those low-trust teams, those mistakes just get swept under the rug until it's too late. And, the opposite of psychological safety is just plain fear. And the consequences can be absolutely catastrophic. Let me tell you about this 17th century warship called the Vasa. The King of Sweden, Gustav, wanted this revolutionary ship, right? 2 full decks of cannons. The problem was, his shipbuilders, they knew the physics just wouldn't work. But they were way too afraid to tell him. Think about that for a second. They spent years building a ship they knew was going to sink. They knew people would probably die. Why? Because telling the king his big idea was flawed was basically a death sentence. They were more afraid of their leader than they were of catastrophic failure. So here's the question for you. Would your team feel safe enough to tell you that your big idea just won't work? Okay, so we've established safety is everything. So how does that change the way we give feedback? Well, let's look at a whole new way of thinking about it, one that's all about replaying the wins. You know the old school way of doing things, right? We pull people aside to talk about that mistake. We focus on what they did wrong. But here's the thing. Brain science tells us that is a terrible idea. The second we start pointing out flaws, the brain goes into this defensive fight or flight mode. And in that state, learning is pretty much physically impossible. But then you have someone like the legendary NFL coach Tom Landry. He did something completely revolutionary. While all the other teams were spending their Mondays going over fumbles and missed tackles, Landry told his team, "From now on, we only replay your winning plays." And look, this wasn't just some feel-good, everybody gets a trophy kind of thing. It was way smarter than that. His gut told him that people learn way faster when they can see a clear model of their own success. By replaying their wins, he was giving them a blueprint. He was showing them, this is what it looks like when you are excellent. It made that success so much easier to repeat, and it built skill and confidence way faster than criticism ever could. All right, so you've got safety, you've got this new way of giving feedback, but none of it works if it's not built on a solid foundation. And that foundation is you. It's your own credibility. People have to trust that you're consistent and that you're competent. It all comes down to being reliable and being an expert. Think about Yellowstone National Park for a second. There are two famous geysers. One is called Steamboat. It's the tallest in the world, 3 times higher than Old Faithful. It's spectacular, but almost nobody goes to see it. Why? Because it's totally unpredictable. It once went 54 years without erupting. Meanwhile, millions of people flock to see Old Faithful. It's smaller, sure, but it's 100% reliable. You can literally set your watch to it. People value reliability way more than flash. This next story, man, it really drives home what reliability looks like when the pressure is on. There's a young woman, a teenager, and she's about to win a huge amateur golf tournament. But on the 17th hole, she picks up her ball on a tiny 4-inch putt, a putt she'd make 1,000 times out of 1,000. It's a tiny technical violation of the rules. And the head referee, the one person who has to make the call, is her own father. He disqualified his own daughter, and she was furious, of course. She lost a $10,000 prize. But years later, someone asked her if she ever thought for a second he'd let her win. And her answer says everything. She said, "Are you kidding? It's Dad." She knew without a single doubt that her father would always do the right thing no matter what it cost him personally. In that one painful moment, he built a foundation of unshakable trust. That is reliability. So let's bring this all home with one last really powerful idea. It's a metaphor that gets to the heart of what true leadership is all about. It's about understanding the deep, deep difference between forcing someone and actually leading them. There's this story of a father who had a dream that his little daughter was playing dangerously close to the edge of a cliff. And in the dream, every time he took a step toward her to pull her back, she would playfully take a step back, getting closer and closer to the edge. His instinct, his gut, was screaming at him to just rush forward and grab her, to force her to be safe. But in the dream, he fought that instinct, and instead he took a step back. And his daughter, confused by this change in their little dance, she paused, and then she took a step forward, toward him, and away from danger. And really, that's what this is all about. That's the ultimate takeaway. When you build that moral authority through psychological safety, through replaying the wins, through your own unshakable reliability, you don't have to force people. By creating that environment of trust, you invite them to step forward. You don't have to push them away from the cliff's edge, you lead them towards safety, and they will choose to follow.